was on the trail in Iowa not long ago, but he's no politician. He's looking for diamonds in the rough. With Lee Cowan, meet American picker Mike Wolfe.
For years, the public was told a story about Mike Wolfe, but parts of that story were never true. Behind the scenes, a drunk driver nearly killed him. His best friend of 40 years died in his arms, and his marriage quietly collapsed. Even worse, someone close to him spent years telling the press he was the villain, and Wolfe never fought back. Why would he stay silent while his reputation was falling apart? And what really happened behind the cameras of American Pickers? Join us as we uncover the real story of what happened to Mike, the kid who picked before he had a word for it. Mike Wolfe was born on June 11, 1964, in Joliet, Illinois, the second of 3 children raised by a single mother in a household where money was tight and resourcefulness was not optional. He was 4 years old when he started going through the trash. Not because he was sent there, but because the alleys behind his neighborhood were full of things that other people had decided were finished, and he had not yet decided that at all. He found a bicycle in the weeds behind a neighbor's house and put air in the tires and wiped it down and rode it until an older kid offered him $5 for it. And he took the $5. And in that transaction, the entire logic of his adult career was established. Something that someone else had abandoned still had value. Finding it before everyone else did was the skill. Recognizing it was the gift. The family moved to Bettendorf, Iowa, and Wolfe grew up in the Quad Cities region with a boy named Frank Fritz, who would eventually become his co-star on national television, though neither of them knew that yet. What they knew was that they were both pickers, in the way that certain kids are pickers before picking becomes a compulsion, pulling things out of barns and garages and roadside piles and carrying them home because the instinct said these things mattered, even when the logic for why was not fully formed. Wolfe walked to school through the alleys rather than the streets, because the alleys were where the garages were open and you could see people tinkering, and where the interesting things ended up when the front of the house was done with them. He never stopped walking that way. By his 20s, Wolfe was a competitive cyclist, racing at Cat 4 and Cat 3 levels from 1989 through 1998, and channeling the same obsessive energy that had been pulling bicycles out of trash heaps since he was 4 years old into a sport that required identical qualities: patience, the willingness to grind, and the ability to spot an opening before the competition did. He opened 2 bicycle stores in Iowa during the 1990s, the Village Bike Shop in East Davenport, and a second store in Eldridge. He financed them by selling a 1934 Harley-Davidson motorcycle to a collector in Bangkok, Thailand. He was not yet a television personality. He was a man who understood that old things had value and that the people who knew where to find them were the people who got to them first. He closed the bike shops and hit the road. For nearly 2 decades, Wolfe drove the back roads of America in a cargo van, logging more than 60,000 miles in search of what he called rusty gold, and built the network of contacts and the encyclopedic market knowledge that would eventually become the backbone of one of the History Channel's most successful shows. He opened Antique Archaeology in LeClaire, Iowa, in 2000, turning a personal empire of accumulated junk into a legitimate retail business that attracted collectors and enthusiasts from across the country. He had been pitching a television show based on his picking life for 5 years before any network took the call seriously. When the History Channel finally did, everything changed at once. So how does a picker from Iowa with a cargo van and a childhood obsession turn a cold call into the highest-rated premiere in History Channel history? What American Pickers actually was. American Pickers premiered on January 18, 2010, and drew 3.1 million viewers on its first night, the highest-rated History Channel debut since Ice Road Truckers launched in 2007. By the end of the first season, an average of 5.4 million viewers were watching each episode, a number that was beating American Idol in certain demographics, and that nobody at the network had anticipated when they handed Wolfe the green light. The concept was simple enough to explain in one sentence. Two guys drive around in a van, buying old things from people who have too many of them, and the execution was simple in the same way that a well-made piece of furniture is simple. Everything unnecessary had been removed, and what remained did exactly what it was supposed to do. Wolfe was the engine of the show, in the way certain television personalities are engines, not because of a performed character, but because of a genuine quality the camera found and could not stop finding. He was actually interested in everything. He was actually moved by the objects he picked up, and the stories attached to them. When he walked into a barn that had not been opened in 30 years and found a 1930s motorcycle under a tarp, the look on his face was not the look of a man who was calculating the resale margin. It was the look of someone who had been looking for that specific thing his whole life and had just found it in exactly the place he had been told to look. That quality is either there or it is not, and it cannot be faked across 27 seasons of television. Frank Fritz was beside him for the first 11 years of that run, and the chemistry between them was the product of 40 years of actual friendship rather than casting, which is why it read differently on screen than the manufactured dynamics of most reality television partnerships. They had been picking together since junior high school. They knew each other's rhythms, blind spots, and negotiating tendencies. When Fritz spotted something Wolfe had walked past, the reaction was genuine competitive irritation rather than pretended surprise. When they argued over a price, the argument had the texture of 40 years of disagreement rather than a scripted back and forth. The show also gave Danielle Colby a significant supporting role as the manager of antique archaeology in LeClaire, and her presence as the anchor of the home base while Wolfe and Fritz were on the road gave the show a structural shape that a pure road trip format would have lacked. The banter was real because the relationship was real, and the relationship was real because it had existed long before any camera crew knew either of their names. When it ended, the way it ended, the story the public received was not the story that had actually happened. Wolfe knew that. He chose not to correct it. But what was the real story behind the feud? And why did Wolfe spend 3 years absorbing the villain narrative rather than tell the truth?
I know exactly what you mean.
I bought a motorcycle when I was 15. I still got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Oh yeah, we both ride quite a
One of the
bit.
bikes in there is it's been with us over 40 years.
The feud that wasn't what it looked like. In July 2021, Frank Fritz's departure from American Pickers was announced, and the press immediately constructed a feud narrative that Wolfe did not dispute. And Fritz, in the interviews he gave over the following months, did not discourage. Fritz told reporters the show had been tilted toward Wolfe 1,000%. He said they had not spoken in 2 years. He suggested Wolfe was replacing him with his younger brother, Robbie. Fans took sides. Comment sections filled up. Wolfe posted a careful, warm Instagram message about missing Frank and wishing him well that Fritz publicly dismissed as scripted and insincere. What Wolfe told People magazine after Fritz's death in September 2024 was that he had known the real reason from the beginning and had made a deliberate decision to keep it private. During the pandemic, Fritz had injured his back and undergone surgery, and the opioid prescription that followed the surgery had combined with the isolation of the lockdown months and the simultaneous collapse of a romantic relationship to create the conditions in which addiction takes hold fastest and hardest. Wolfe staged an intervention with the people who loved Fritz. It did not hold. When production resumed and the History Channel required negative drug tests as a condition of filming, Fritz could not provide them. The network made the decision. Wolfe absorbed the feud narrative publicly rather than expose a man he had known since they were children to a conversation he was not equipped to have for himself. What that cost Wolfe was 3 years of being the villain in a story he knew was wrong. What it cost Fritz was the show, and then the stroke in July 2022 that paralyzed his right side and removed his ability to make legal decisions, and then 2 years of rehabilitation, and then the hospice room in Iowa in September 2024, where Wolfe sat and held his hand and told him he was not mad at him and that he loved him and told him to go find his mother. Wolfe closed his friend's eyes himself. The public story about the feud was still the version most people knew when Fritz died. Wolfe waited until the obituaries had been written and then quietly told the real one. So what was falling apart at home while he was busy protecting someone else's reputation on the road? The marriage, the divorce, and what came after. Mike Wolfe married Jody Faith on September 8, 2012, in a ceremony in Leiper's Fork, Tennessee, that was themed around the 2000 Coen brothers film, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? A detail that tells you everything you need to know about both of them. Jody had managed his social media accounts and many of his business operations throughout the height of American Pickers' popularity, and their daughter, Charlie, was born the same year they married. For most of the show's first decade, the Wolfe family was the stable domestic backdrop to the on-road adventure of the television persona. The house in Leiper's Fork, the property in LeClaire, the life that the picking financed. The separation came in June 2020. Jody filed for divorce in November of that year, citing irreconcilable differences. The settlement, finalized in 2021, required Wolfe to pay approximately $634,000 in alimony. Jody received ownership of their Nashville home and a property in North Carolina, along with a share of American Pickers royalties through 2026. Wolfe retained multiple other properties. The legal resolution was negotiated rather than litigated, which meant that the specifics of what went wrong inside the marriage were never made public, and Wolfe has not offered them. The next chapter included Letitia Klein, a former model and motorcycle enthusiast whom Wolfe began seeing in 2021, and whose presence in his life quickly became visible to anyone following his social media. Klein shared the specific combination of interests, vintage vehicles, open roads, and the particular American aesthetic that Wolfe had been documenting his entire career, which made her presence look less like a rebound and more like a logical continuation. They shot a commercial for Harley-Davidson together. They traveled. They appeared together at the Day of Reckoning film premiere in Los Angeles in March 2025. When asked about marriage, both of them gave the same answer. They were enjoying their lives and not in a hurry to define anything more than that. What happened on the night of September 12, 2025, in Columbia, Tennessee, was not something either of them had prepared for. So what happens when a man who has already lost his best friend and his marriage gets into a car one night and comes inches from losing everything else? The crash that could have killed him. Mike Wolfe and Letitia Klein were driving a vintage Porsche 356 through Columbia, Tennessee on the evening of September 12, 2025, when a 76-year-old man named Lerone Heads pulled out from a side street in an SUV. Klein later described it as having little to no time to react. The impact was devastating. Wolfe broke the steering wheel with his body. Klein said he could have been impaled by the steering column. He was not. He was released from the hospital the following day with a broken nose, stitches, heavy bruising across his face, and injuries to his knee and wrist. Letitia Klein's injuries were considerably more severe. A broken jaw in 3 places, broken ribs, a fractured sternum, and a partially collapsed lung. She underwent multiple surgeries and spent weeks in hospital before beginning what would be a long recovery. Wolfe posted an Instagram Stories update the following morning. By the grace of God, "We're both safe and okay." He posted a photograph of the wreckage of the Porsche alongside the words, "It's been a rough night, but now there's light at the end of the tunnel." Lerone Heads was subsequently charged with DUI, vehicular assault, and failure to yield resulting in serious bodily injury. Klein returned to TikTok in December 2025 to announce she was preparing to give her victim impact statement in court, saying, "Even though I'm still limited with speech, I have a lot to say." Wolfe described the accident as a second chance, and the phrase carried weight it would not have carried in a different year. He had already spent 2024 losing his oldest friend. He had already closed the Nashville Antique Archaeology store in April 2025 after 15 years, describing the decision as a choice to simplify his life and focus on what matters most. The crash arrived in the middle of a period that already felt like a reckoning, and he responded to it the way he has responded to most things: staying visible, staying grateful, and getting back to work. So, what does that work look like now? And is American Pickers actually over? The show, the new show, and what comes next. In December 2025, Danielle Colby posted a video on her 50th birthday announcing that American Pickers was done. She described it as a financial crossroads, said she had found out the show was finished, and thanked fans for 15 years of watching. The response was immediate. Headlines ran across every entertainment outlet. Wolfe, who was in the middle of voiceover work for his new History Channel series, responded within days. American Pickers is still on the landscape for new shows. History Channel confirmed to Parade that there was no truth to the cancellation reports and that production could resume after Wolfe completed his new project. Colby subsequently clarified that her perspective had been primarily financial and that Wolfe had called her personally to remind her that things were still happening. The new show is History's Greatest Picks with Mike Wolfe, which premiered on February 22, 2026, and represents a genuinely different format from the road trip structure of American Pickers. Where Pickers was built around the negotiation and the find, Greatest Picks is built around the story, 8 historical artifacts per episode, presented through studio segments, expert interviews, and dramatic reenactments that bring the provenance of significant American objects to life. Wolfe described it as shot totally different. He described himself as excited and nervous simultaneously. He said viewers were in for a ride, which is the kind of thing that people say when they mean it. Season 27 of American Pickers, currently airing, was dedicated to Frank Fritz. Wolfe has confirmed he has signed for additional seasons. The show that he pitched for 5 years before anyone would take the meeting, that premiered to 5 million viewers and ran for more than 400 episodes, is on hiatus, while its creator makes a different show and recovers from a car accident and from the grief of losing the person who was beside him for the first 11 years of it. The hiatus is the first in 15 years of continuous production. Wolfe has called it a chance to breathe and said it is going to feel good. Now, Mike Wolfe is 61 years old, living in Tennessee, co-parenting a teenage daughter, recovering from a car accident, hosting a new television show, keeping the antique archaeology store in LeClaire open after closing Nashville, and describing the current chapter of his life with the same language he has always used for the things he finds in barns. This still has value. The story is not finished, and the person who recognizes that before everyone else does is the one who gets to take it home. He appeared in the Western film Day of Reckoning alongside Letitia Klein, which premiered in Los Angeles in March 2025, marking his first significant acting credit outside the reality television world he built. He maintains his endorsement relationship with Indian Motorcycles. He operates Two Lanes Guest House in Columbia, Tennessee, where guests stay in a property furnished with pics from the show, surrounded by the objects that American Pickers turned into television, and that Wolfe turned into a life before the cameras arrived. He also maintains his 2 Lanes line of American-made apparel and accessories, and continues to expand the LeClaire Antique Archaeology Store, which has become a destination in its own right, drawing fans of the show who make the pilgrimage to the Iowa river town where the whole enterprise began. Do you think the public misunderstood Mike Wolfe all these years? And what do you think the future of American pickers should be? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the next video on your screen.